Hello, my name's Jeff Ellis. I'm a mixing engineer based out of East West Studios. Today, we're at my not home studio. This is my just normal ass studio.
Yeah, dude.
Not in a home. This is Studio 4, and the cool thing about this is I was East West's first intern, along with a dude named Ben O'Neill, who's amazing, and he's still working, and he's a legend. But the first thing they had us do was actually clean this room out. So every day I come in here, it takes me back to like the days when I was an intern, you know? And this was all like full of junk back then, and like one of the first things they had me do was take out this big gobo and get an axe and take it out to the back parking lot and like axe it down so it could fit in a dumpster. So that's how I started. So this is like being at East West, now having my own room here is like a complete full circle moment.
Full circle,
crazy.
dude.
So, yeah, should we jump in?
Let's check it out.
So this is Candace Stewart. She's the studio manager of East West Studios, and she's proudly hung up here because without her, none of this would have been possible for me, so that's amazing. We don't have an official name. We just call this the B room. Okay. And this is kind of where we have an Atmos system set up to do Atmos mixes, as well as we have another rig over here, a stereo rig where we do a lot of session prepping, something that I call premixing. And this computer has like every plugin and every DAW, and it's just, it's kind of set up where we can print stems and whatnot. So we do the real ass stereo mixing in the other room, which we'll see in a second, but I do a lot of what I call pre-mixing in this room, which is when basically like I don't like getting stems from artists ever. I think stems are an outdated paradigm. I want to get a DAW session, whatever made the latest approved rough bounce of the song, and that's what I like to start mixing off of, and I'll do that in here. Because it's like the old thing, it's like, well, 100% dry stems, it's like, well, the production's gone, so it's not a song anymore. And 100% wet stems, well, now like everybody's using way too many plugins nowadays. They're over compressing everything. They're just like ruining all the emotion with over processing. So if I can't get into the DAW session and back out some of that stuff, you can't make the best mix possible. Now, people at home are gonna be like, oh, that's so hard to do, like know every DAW and do all this. But it's not really that hard, because to learn a DAW to the point where you can just manipulate plugins isn't hard. And if you want to be a serious professional, like sometimes like it's difficult, you know what I mean? But what's really hard is getting shitty stems and doing a good mix. And if you want to do the best mix possible and you want to bring out all the life and emotion, sometimes you got to get into that DAW session. And almost everybody uses Ableton or Logic, or Pro Tools. So between those three, you can get a lot of it. There's other options like getting the producer to come to the session, and you can kind of finesse their session and then bounce stems out of that. So there's a lot of options, but it's not as hard as you think. But again, I have a team of 2 assistants helping me, and I just want to be able to do the best mix possible. And if I'm working off of wet stems, I feel like my hands are tied. And if I'm working off of dry stems, there's no song anymore. So it's not like 1990 where the dry stems kind of actually sound like a record. It just doesn't work like that anymore. Okay, so this is like a teenage bedroom aesthetic, and this vibe has followed me a couple studios now. I guess it's followed me from when I had a teenage bedroom studio, and then I was at Bedrock in Echo Park for a while, and this was kind of like the vibe of the whole studio. Yeah. And so this is just kind of, I wanted the studio to have like a teenager's bedroom aesthetic, as kind of like a way to not take everything so seriously. Yeah. You know?
I love it.
Yeah, so there's just a million things to look at in here. This is kind of like if you teleported into my brain, probably what you would see. This is sick, okay? So this is really
so cool.
This is really signed by Keanu Reeves and the director Chad of this John Wick film. And someone gave that to me, my friend Emerson gave that to me as a birthday present, so that's pretty sick,
cool, man.
Right?
That was the first thing that like caught my attention.
Yeah.
Outside of the doll. The doll scared me
the doll.
a little bit.
I'm used to the doll being there, but yeah, there's so much stuff, and all of this is just memories, you know, from various projects to just like random stuff. Some of these, I have like New York delicatessen style wall of fame up here. It's like some of my friends. Some of the photos in here aren't even people that I know. I just found at a swap meet. Some of it is like, there's Trevor's parking ticket. Trevor, my assistant. There's like some of his parking tickets outside the studio.
Next to the records.
Yeah.
What are these records? We got Channel Orange.
Yep, that
which was
Channel Orange.
Next door when you started that, right? Right in 3?
Okay, so I started as an assistant engineer on Channel Orange, and then through the grace of fucking God, got upgraded to the engineer of the album. And then because of that, I ended up going on to be Frank Ocean's engineer for many years. And Andy, you were around for those records, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. How lucky do you have to be to have your first like major project as an engineer be Frank Ocean's Channel Orange? Like,
it's amazing.
I was just kind of terrified the whole time that I was gonna fuck it up. You know what I mean? Or like delete something, or I was definitely in try-hard mode back then for sure. But what an experience. Here's the thing, like, you gotta work hard to be the best, but there's gotta be some lucky catapults there. So I like to think that like, I mean, I was in the right place at the right time, but also I worked really hard to be in that moment. But that was such a good experience because I worked on Channel Orange and Blonde as his engineer, and just being in those rooms and absorbing that, like, the art of those records, that would go on to kind of shape my approach to mixing going into the future. So after I stopped working with Frank, I just focused specifically on mixing after that. So that was kind of like starting over from the bottom again, and I had to work my way up. So I went from being in like the best studios on earth back into my living room studio, and had to like fight my way up from there. Because even though like people probably think like, oh, you have some cool credits and a Grammy, and all of a sudden it's a money tree and every record label boss on earth is calling you. It does not work like that whatsoever. So credits are okay, but it's more about like what's in your network. How many producers do you know? How many A&Rs know you? And when you're working in like secretive Frank Ocean albums, like, you're not building a massive network, right? So I really had to start over from the beginning again and kind of like fight my way to where we are here today at East West Studios. So the journey between stopping Frank and being here was probably like 37 years or something like that. So it was a journey back here, but I made it back to East West. So that
which is
like,
incredible, man. Having a room at East West is like unobtainium.
It's unobtainium, and also like the biggest full circle dream come true.
Yeah,
if you would ask me back when I was an intern, runner, engineer here, if that would ever be possible, I didn't even have dreams like that because it's such an unobtainium dream.
Yeah.
Maybe the lesson is that I should have dreamed bigger or whatever, but
here you are.
My goal was to have a room at a classic recording studio.
Yeah.
At least for like, maybe just a year or something, you know, just to feel what that felt like. And that's like not even a thing anymore almost. There's like no classic recording studios left, you know, so just a couple of them. So, well, Trevor and Ivan get it all set up for me, but I do the premix here myself.
Oh, cool.
Sometimes I'll be like, Trevor, do you think you can handle this premix? And this one's easy. So dial back the compression a little bit and stem it out. So what we do is we get the DAW session, make sure it sounds exactly like their latest rough mix, and then we take it from there. Because our goal as mixers is we want to remodel a house. So when you're remodeling a house, if there's some really cool tile in the bathroom, you don't want to just like superfluously like destroy the tile, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the fixtures are lame, so we're going to replace those. So when we get the DAW session, we can make sure to protect the producer's aesthetic that's great and what defines the song, and then we can build from there. Now, every once in a while, there's a song where we can wipe everything out and start over, but generally, when you're working with great producers, you want to protect all the great production aesthetic and then take it from there. So once we get the premix, let's say it's in Logic, I get the Logic session, all the plugins optimized, then using what I call the solo and bounce method, Trevor, Ivan will solo bounce everything out and put it into Pro Tools where I can do the final mix out on the console. And that's kind of like my workflow. You have to evolve. It's 2024. If you're not mixing off of people's DAW sessions, like, you're handicapping yourself. I can't do good mixes without the DAW session. I was like,
totally.
Yeah. We were all thrust into this world of Atmos too soon, and it was a scary time, and we were all scrambling to get these Atmos studios set up. So originally I was being quoted for some Atmos system that was like $250,000 and all this. I'm like, I don't even know if Atmos is gonna be a thing. And then I was like searching around, like, what am I gonna do? Is there another way? And then somehow through the grace of God, I got linked up with the Cali Audio people, and they came through, and the first thing they did, I was trying to remember, like, I met Charles, who's like the genius behind these speakers, who designed these speakers, and initially it would be like, well, this system with the Cali Audio way is not gonna be $250,000.
Yeah.
I think it, back then, I forget, but it was maybe like $7,000 to $10,000 because for the whole system.
Yeah.
The speakers themselves were like way less than that, but there's other stuff to do in Atmos system. So I was like, well, let's just get started with that, and then I can always upgrade in the future.
Sure.
However, what I would come to find over the years is that the Cali speakers ended up being my favorite mixing tools in general. So I, over time, like, I was using other brands of speaker, and they've been all phased out, and I'm only using Cali Audio stuff now for everything. Charles came in and he taught me about this concept of neutral reference. And I like to think of that as like what you hear inside of the computer is, or what lives inside of the computer is what you hear outside of the computer, as close as possible, right? So if we can get into this place of neutral reference, then we can build our mix on top of that, and it'll translate really well. And I mean, he just like revolutionized my life to where once I started working with that way with his speakers, and his speakers are designed to kind of be like neutral references, changed my life completely. Like the amount of time it took me to finish a mix was like dramatically cut down. The amount of notes that I got was dramatically cut down, and I no longer needed to car test things and do this and that or whatever. So it's amazing. A blessing. And I want everybody at home to break out of this paradigm that to be good, it's got to be super expensive. It's not true. I've owned there's a pair of $90,000 speakers right there just sitting on the wall. So I don't even, it's not even like, but I don't want to like, I'm not talking crap on any other speaker company. It's all amazing or whatever. But the guy here before me in this room was Spike Stent. And I remember seeing his setup, and he was not using expensive speakers ever. And it's like, people nowadays are like, well, it's got like to be this professional, it's got to be these expensive speakers. Meanwhile, like, the NS10s were the cheap speaker of those days, and it was okay if like Bob Clearmountain used NS10, so why do I need to use $6,000 speakers nowadays? Sometimes the best tool is not the most expensive tool, and I used to have the ego where I need to like buy the most expensive stuff so people will love me, you know what I mean? Think I'm a badass, you know? But we were talking about this yesterday, but I've like dropped all that now. It's like, that's just insecurity basically, so. Now it's all about what's the best tool for the job. And the advantage is I have a pair of these Calis in New York too, so if I travel, instead of like annoying someone to be like, hey, can I rent these or can I get a pair of these and whatever, I just buy a pair, ship it there, and now they live there, you know? Yeah,
I love that this is kind of like a lunch table.
Okay,
set up here.
That was a temporary installation that has remained for 3 years. And that's often how the brown foldy table often seems like we're just gonna do this for a second, and then 3 or 4 years later, it's still a brown foldy table with a cloth on top of it.
Yeah, dude.
But yeah.
With an Atmos rig.
And like this chair we stole from upstairs, and just this chair will wreck your back.
Oh yeah.
Like this is a back wrecker right here. And you know what's crazy? I buy these guys over here a standing desk and a non-back wrecker chair, and I'll walk in, and Trevor and Ivan will have like the back wrecker right here.
Yeah,
like,
dude.
Why is this even here? Like, I don't know what it is. Like, I learned, this is I think a Hag Capisco or something. I learned this from Josh Goodwin in his studio.
Oh, yeah.
I sat in one of his chairs and I was like, damn, this might be the answer that I've been seeking.
Yeah.
If you can make it to like this level in music with a intact back, I commend you. It's like usually the first thing to go, so.
100%.
Yeah, and we have all standing desks otherwise, but we never use them. That's how that goes, right?
I love it, man.
So this is like the more professional side, right? There's kind of like business and pleasure. This is where we'll do the main stereo mixing. This is laid out in such a way that I call a split station setup. So we have all the computer world over here, and then we have console world over here. I think like an extremely important concept is this split station setup, because when we're locked into computer brain, and we're looking at the screen, like our whole, whatever part of our brain is processing visual data. It kind of clamps out or crowds out the creative part of your brain, right? So imagine I had Pro Tools here, and if I'm like mixing this way, I'm like looking at the sound, and it's just like, you know, night shift where the screen gets red all of a sudden? Yeah. So you're like mixing, you're on Pro Tools, your back is hunched and you're like deep in your mix, and then the whole screen kind of goes red because it's night shift time. It blocks out the blue light so you can sleep better. And then all of a sudden it seems like your mix changed, right?
Okay,
So that's the first time I was like, wait a second, my eyes are really influencing everything way too much. And it's the same way, every single plugin advertisement that you see on Instagram nowadays will have like the before in black and white, and it's like before, and then they unbypass in the after, and all the colors come back, and it gets louder and brighter, and like, this is, eye shenanigan influences what you're hearing so much, and it's not a little bit, it's massive. So how do we get around that? Well, split station setup. So now we have to use computers all the time. I spend a lot of time in computer world, like hunched over doing my thing. However, when I started to work in this world of production, and now this is music, right? And then I come out over here, and all of a sudden I'm conducting this thing, and you feel that pressure in your brain of your like ocular, whatever the, I don't know, the visual processing part of your brain is, relaxes, and then the creative part of the brain takes over. It's the same way as like, if you close your eyes, all of a sudden you start hearing music. So there are some screens here, but this isn't enough visual feedback to really like mess with that too much. So the whole ending phase of my mixing is getting everything out here on trim automation and touch, and then now we are kind of like automating out a mix, and it seems like a little like old hat to be like, oh, you need the faders and the this and that, and then people think about like the faders in the console as like some like analog thing, and it, like the analog is making it better, whatever. I don't really buy into that. I think having the console is what enables you to get out of visual brain and go into creative brain, into your feeling brain, and it's something that you have to experience to really know how important it is. The whole first 70% of my career, I was locked in the brain and like the mouse, and you're mixing with my eyes and stuff. And this is an Avid S4, and this is by far the best decision I ever made in terms of mixing. And it doesn't color the sound at all. This is just a controller for Pro Tools, right? And just having a transport here, I can get the whole mix down to a couple faders. And then even things like, I can't set a reverb if I'm looking at the plugin or whatever. So anything that I press in here, like if I pressed a fader right there, that'll map to this knob right here. And now I can just, or I can have a reverb return, and I set the level not looking at a screen. You'd be shocked. Like if you mix a song entirely with a mouse and keyboard and then entirely without looking at a screen, those will be two wildly different mixes. Even setting reverb levels or delay levels, the level of a guitar solo, even the way that you EQ things, massively different if you don't have any visual feedback. So yeah, it was a huge level up. And you're probably thinking, Jeff, like so many of the top mixers nowadays like don't use anything like this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, they would all be better if they did. And that's crazy, right? To think that's crazy. But there's a reason why the old goats, like Tom Elmhurst and seemed like Manny, like they haven't gone entirely in the box. And I think it's because like they can't be creative without this system, you know what I mean? So I don't think it's about analog versus digital. I think it's a workflow thing, and I think it's a feeling brain thing. The problem is though, Andy, when I don't have a setup like this, I can't function. You know what I mean? So in my home studio, I have this setup, but you can duplicate this. This is like insanely expensive. Yeah. And I needed a business loan to pay this off and everything. However, you can do a version of this for much less expensive. I have a whole chapter in Mixer Brain about the split station setup and how important that is to my thing.
Wait, what's Mixer Brain?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Andy. Wow, product placement time. Okay, so it's ugly out there. So remember how I was talking about like I get DAW sessions from everybody? I'm not getting stems. So I see everybody's DAW sessions, from the top producers in the world to indie people, up and comers, and it's a disaster, okay? And why is it a disaster? Well, they're all really creative, they make amazing songs, but everybody's learned, myself included, to some extent off of YouTube and like these things you subscribe to, where the people go through what plugins they put on the songs that they mixed, and everything's being taught off of YouTube. And what ends up happening is everybody's getting way too focused on, like, you imagine a painter getting way too focused on the paintbrush and not enough at the canvas, right?
Right.
Engineers are so focused on the paintbrush. Like, imagine if a painter was called like a paintbrush engineer or whatever. That's like so goofy, right?
Yeah.
But everybody is so obsessed with their tools, and then all of these tools that are sold to us by default almost makes everything louder and brighter and louder and brighter. And I have this principle that I call the Riptide principle that I teach about in this course, but like, we're so drawn to louder and brighter that we spiral out of control into these death spirals. And one of my things is just like reject the chain mindset, but I'll get these vocal chains that have like 15 plugins on a vocal, and every little element of emotion is completely removed from it. It's like, we all know how corny it sounds if you take a MIDI piano and you just put all the velocity to like 127, there's no change in the velocity and all the notes are at the same volume, and all of a sudden it sounds super corny. Well, that's like the same thing you're doing when you have 7 compressors on a vocal. All the nuance and changes in volume and emotion just get stripped out, and you just have this like dead and lifeless performance. And that's focusing way too much on the paintbrush and not enough on the canvas. So the course, I had to make this thing because it's gotten to the point where almost everything that's sent to me is like in such a bad place. It's like depressing, and I've been bitching about it for years. And I'm like, okay, I need to stop bitching and see what I can do to help fix this. And that course is called Mixer Brain. And it is a principle-based approach. There's no like techniques and tips and tricks. It's all principles of why you're using the paintbrush and trying to return everybody back to the canvas. So
yeah,
Mixer Brain is a bad thing. The name of the course is Mixer Brain, and that's a good thing. But the Mixer Brain is bad. I want to get everybody back to the feeling brain. And the good news is it's just going to make everything way easier for you, because you're going to start acting out of emotion and art again, instead of just like applying tricks and plugins and tools and all this stuff. And once you master these principles, the tools that you have been using, you'll start applying them in a much better way. But I'm not seeing any of this stuff on these people that are trying to teach mixing or whatever on YouTube, though the Andy Masters channel is legit, I must say.
Yeah, dude, super legit. Well, that's because I get guys like you on here.
Well, you're actually a classically trained engineer too, you know what I mean? How rare is that nowadays?
I say pretend engineer.
I like saying classically trained. Doesn't it sound cool, like a classically trained
Oh,
pianist?
yeah, like a vocalist, yeah.
I'm classically trained at East West Studios. It's gonna be unlike anything that's out there. Yeah. And it's also really silly and goofy. Oh, and then we're gonna be mixing, this. No one knows this yet, but once we learn all the principles, we're gonna be applying them to mixing a song from the band called The Neighborhood, okay?
Ooh,
so that's really exciting too.
Heck
but
yeah,
it's not about that, it's about the principles.
Right.
The principles, Andy.
Yeah.
Because it's principle based, it applies to every genre. It's mostly for like producers and songwriters, and I mean engineers and mixers will benefit from it too, but I want to get you to the point where you get out of your own way, return to an artful place, and you'll start making music to where it's like, this probably doesn't even need to get mixed, because most of the people that would end up mixing it would be in their mixer brain and just wreck it anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Jeff, I don't know if you know how these videos work. You've been like given value this whole time. This is not about giving value. This is about looking at stuff.
Stuff. Okay, let's look at stuff. Sorry about that.
The stuff you got.
My bad, dude.
You know,
I'm so scared to do anything like a lot. You know what I mean? When I see it, I was like scary. But when you don't see it, you do scary stuff, and because it sounds cool, and then you're like, then you go back, you're like, oh my god, I put the knob at 9. But yeah, it's like that visual feedback triggers some weird thing in your heart of fear, you know?
The fact that you just set up another set of speakers.
Yeah.
In computer mode, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense.
And they're all EQ'd to be neutral reference, so it all kind of sounds the same. So I'm here, and and even though these are kind of smaller, these could be the same speaker. These can just go a little bit louder because they're bigger, but every speaker, and even the JBL M2s that I just got, which are dope, they're all calibrated to be neutral. So they're all, it's not like a different world. I don't feel like sonically it's like really different. I like having one type of speaker, neutral reference.
Yep.
You ever like, you're mixing on like NS10s and you feel like you're in one world, and then you go to like a Genelec or something completely different, and you're like, nothing makes sense in my soul anymore, and you're like, it's like, what am I doing? And then like because the NS10s were super bright, that makes the Genelec sound super dull, but when you're on the Genelecs for a while, they're like not as brightness, they have way more bass, and you go back to the NS10s and it's like you're just like going crazy all the time. I'm just like one pair of speakers, neutral reference, let's go. Now, obviously I have some big speakers because sometimes you have like A&Rs and clients and stuff that needed a little bit louder than like a smaller speaker thing can do. You'd be surprised, like this thing is like, oh, people are gonna wanna come in and like the room is shaking or whatever. But most people don't want that. Like I could survive with the small ones, but every once in a while it's nice just in case there's like, most people actually don't want to be that loud. It's fun every once in a while, but for mixing it's not super helpful.
When I started here, this was like a glass table and 3 software guys.
Yes, yeah.
And it was not used. And, and the whole room was transformed before Spike came in.
Yeah.
And treated this whole place. Yeah. And you got to come in after.
I just swoop in, right?
Dude.
I just swooped in. I'm so lucky. After I stopped working with Frank, like way back, I did an album with Caliucci's, which was sick. Isolation. Caliucci's is like, I'm so bad at like telling people genres of what it is. It's like, people know what it is. People know, she's a huge star. I guess it's like pop in the sense that it's like popular music. It's a little R&B, kind of Latin-y sounding nowadays too. I don't know what it is.
Caliucci, okay.
I've done records with The Neighborhood. I've done records with Doja Cat. I did a big album with Joji. What else? Omar Apollo, JPEG Mafia. So much stuff. Like I blank whenever it's right in front of me. Snow Allegra, amazing R&B artist. I've done some cool hyper pop stuff with like 100 Gex and things like that. Super cool. I just did this really sick album with this band called Machine Girl. It's really cool.
Doing this.
Yeah, I don't talk about the records that aren't out yet.
Yeah.
Oh, David, D4VD, David.
Okay.
He's like one of the sickest kind of artists out right now. Yeah, it's just like all different genres. Like when you take a very principled approach to music, you can go from genre to genre because it's like, where's the emotion live? You know what I mean? And that's the one like core that binds everything together is the emotion.
When you started working with Frank Ocean, you went from an assistant engineer, which is a very demanding, and you have to be sort of a chameleon every day and switch between totally different types of stuff. What do you think it was when you started working with Frank that clicked and made you stick around?
From his perspective, I think he could sense that he could trust me. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That he could trust me. We had a good like sense of humor rapport. We'd make each other laugh. It wasn't because I was the best engineer you could get for the money. You know what I mean? That's not all about that. Like I think he trusted me, and like people can sense when they can trust someone, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Not to leak stuff, not to take weird photos, not to do like, he could see that I was competent enough and that he could trust me, and that it's just energy, you know?
Yeah.
And the reason why I stuck with him and left my job at East West, because like, I don't know if people understand this, but like, even though you're called like an assistant engineer, you work for the studio. You're like the main, that's like the top level at a studio. So one day as an assistant engineer, you could be literally on your phone in the lobby for the whole session doing nothing, or you could be literally running Pro Tools on an 80-piece orchestra. So you have to be like, I don't know if anybody's seen Inspector Gadget. You might remember Inspector Gadget. So like
Go Gadget.
In Inspector Gadget, the little kids that like followed him around would be like doing everything important, and Inspector Gadget is like a goofball that is like not really doing anything. And it was like, because of the kids, like he looked like this great thing. But like a lot of times when you're the assistant, the engineer doesn't really know what they're doing. So my point is like, by the time you're the assistant engineer at a badass studio like East West, you're a pretty gangster engineer in a lot of different ways, you know? So,
and you get to watch every first come in and producer and see exactly what they do.
You get to be a fly on the wall to every type of engineering. The cool thing about East West is that it was all different genres, right? Like if you just work at like a rap studio or whatever, you'll get really good at rap, but you'll never see an orchestra being recorded.
Right.
Or if you're just like at a Nashville country studio and you've never seen a rap session in your life, you won't know what to do. So it's completely different workflows. even the way that everybody does lunch is, that's one funny thing that I always thought was funny. Like, different genres would approach lunch differently.
Yeah.
Like a rock session, everybody gets together and does lunch together, you know? And then like a rap session, it's usually every man for themselves. And then if it's a pop session, it could be either way. It's just like, you know what I mean? It's really funny. Like the different genres approach everything completely differently. The Pro Tools skill set for rap is completely different than running the Pro Tools machine in an orchestra session. Like there's a completely different vocabulary, you know? It's like 4 free to bar 25, like tacit this bar. It's like you learn a whole different language. So that's the blessing of working at a studio like East West, is that you see every genre, you get experience with all those different languages. And that's why when it came time for me to do the engineering on Channel Orange, like a lot of that record is real instruments, right?
Yeah.
So we're recording, I knew how to record real drums. I knew how to record real strings. I knew how to do guitar and bass. I knew how to record organs, and sometimes engineers nowadays just only know how to do vocals, maybe.
One or two things.
And a lot of times they just learn how to do that wrong too, so it's...
But also he liked you.
Like, it was because he trusted me, yeah. It was a good vibe. That's so much more important than anything else. Someone said, remember Crass? You got to be like a computer nerd that can hang out with Britney Spears. You know what I mean? I think it's something like that.
Yeah,
and that's a rare person. It's kind of the vibe. Like a session is like a sacred place, right?
Yep.
So if there isn't like a level of trust in there, what do we have? You know what I mean? Because an artist has to be their most vulnerable in front of you to do their best performance. So if you're going to be someone that's going to be talking about like all the secrets, you know what I mean? It's like you're just not. It's not for you, you know.
Jeff, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Andy.
I'm gonna link your stuff down below. Mixer Brain, go check it out.
Cool.
All the things, go follow you, and all the stuff you're putting out is on your Instagram, and I'm sure there's your website.
Ellis Worldwide on Instagram, and it's so cool to see your YouTube channel blow up.
Congratulations to you, man.
Cool.
I think it's the coolest thing to have come up through here and then be back here and working.
A dream come true.
I'm super happy for you and excited for the course.
Dream big, kids.
Yep. All right. See you guys in the next one.
Bye.